And we're back with the show. This is once again the PCC Multiverse. My name is Joe Glassford from Pop Culture Cosmos, and we're back with another edition of Week 3 in the NFL. And for your fantasy football fans, it's now hot and heavy into the season. And you know what? Shame on me. I already made mistake number one because I didn't consult our man in the fantasy football universe. It is Tyler Baker from the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast, which you can get today every Tuesday, every Thursday, and every Saturday on Apple Podcasts, Libsyn, Google Play, Overcast.fm, and even many more outlets. Tyler, as always, it's great to have you here. And man, I thought what I was going to make was an apparently easy move, which you know I could just sense in your voice before we went on. It really wasn't the move to make.
Don't beat yourself up too bad. So it's it's Thursday night. The game just finished, and Sammy Watkins went ham. And unfortunately, Gerald took him out, which honestly was not a bad call. Sammy Watkins is very much underperformed. Nobody expected this game from him tonight. So sometimes you make the right decision, and it ends up being the bad call. But look, fantasy football is not about getting it perfect. Fantasy football is about making the best decisions that you can and trusting those decisions and moving forward when you make a bad one. So
No. Fantasy football is about winning, man. It's about winning, man. Winning,
but it's a grind. It's a grind. It is 14 weeks. Your league is anywhere from 14 to 16 weeks long. It's a grind. So, and I tell people all the time, you're not going to win or lose your league in the draft. You're not going to win or lose your league in one single week or one bad call. It's about staying informed. It's a grind. So no worries. We will get you back on the right track. No worries.
Indeed. So that's what I get for thinking on my own and not reaching out to my good friend here, Tyler Baker. Once again,
you got a guy.
Two ways to get a hold of his information. Well, three ways if you include our show. But one of the main ways is to listen to his podcast each and every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. That's the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast. You got to update yourself for that if you want to get the latest info as far as who to get on the waiver wire, injury reports, and the whole 9 yards when it comes to fantasy football. And also as well, the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast Facebook site. You just go over there. He just joined the group, and he'll answer all your questions in regards to trades, movements, everything that I should have asked according to this week. He does actually on a daily basis, and I see them tossing around.
Yeah.
But is there any other way that they can also get a hold of you as well?
I am in the process of building a website, and that will be ready probably next week, and that will host my articles. I've been very busy with that. Building websites not as simple as it sounds. So
I definitely would know about that.
Sure. But the Facebook discussion group is the best way to get my attention, and you can take a screenshot of your team, take a screenshot of the waiver wire, and I have guys up there all the time asking questions, and myself and a couple other moderators, we do a really good job of not just answering the questions, but telling you why. And we don't get everything right, but you'll come on and you'll get a great perspective. You'll get a learned opinion, and you will get my attention through the Facebook group. And I watch every play of every game every week, and I will tell you why I think what I think. And I'm not always right, but most of the time, you can take it to the bank.
Well, and all these other guys, these fantasy gurus out there that, are, highly compensated, which, Tyler Baker will be replacing by hopefully this time next season in their slots, as the man in the know when it comes to fantasy football, because we know we would like their paychecks. But anyways, that aside, nobody gets it 100% right. And
nobody.
And the reason why I switched Sammy Watkins out was actually one of the first topics I want to get to with the Arizona Cardinals. David Johnson, unfortunately, has an owie, and according to one of his latest interviews on it, really doesn't care what fantasy owners think because he's out for a little while. But one of the replacements in that offense was J.J. Nelson, who is risen to be one of the top receivers in all of football. but something tells me you don't sound like you're going to be telling me the great news as far as him long term. Is that correct? Or is it something that maybe a short-term matchup problem for him coming up?
Well, something about that game last week. Now, J.J. Nelson exploded last week, 5 catches, 120 yards, and a touchdown. J.J. Nelson has scored a touchdown in each of his seven previous games going back to next year. So J.J. Nelson is a good receiver. J.J. Nelson is also dealing with a hamstring injury. And if we actually look at the Arizona game last week, J.J. Nelson had 7 targets. Jaron Brown had 11 targets. And in watching that game, Jaron Brown could have very easily had the game that J.J. Nelson did if basically the ball would have bounced a different way. So as far as opportunity, Jaron Brown actually had more opportunities, and Jaron Brown did just fine. He finished 4 receptions for 73 yards. Now, J.J. Nelson is not a bad play. J.J. Nelson, though, is dealing with a hamstring injury, so we'll have to see on Friday's injury report how he is practicing, and if he's a full participant in practice, you're fine. If he's limited, there should be a little bit of hesitation there. But I know that everybody in fantasy football this week rushed out to get J.J. Nelson, and I don't think enough people paid enough attention to Jaron Brown, who actually got more targets last week. So in the game that they have this weekend, we'll see. But I'm definitely going to keep a very close eye on J.J. Nelson to see how that hamstring is going, because J.J. Nelson's game is all about his speed. Now, Dallas is missing a couple of their defensive backs, so that passing defense is vulnerable. And if J.J. Nelson is not 100%, he can probably still be okay. But with a hamstring injury on a speedster receiver, that's a pretty big red flag for me.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to be on pins and needles too on the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast Facebook group site, because I need to find out if J.J. Nelson is a player or not, because that's who I switched out for Sammy Watkins.
Sure.
Unfortunately. So needless to say, moving on. Is there any other really good targets to go out for this weekend? Maybe any waiver wire pickups, or are there must plays that you must have this weekend based off of any matchups that you see forthcoming?
Sure. Well, in Tennessee, DeMarco Murray, he is dealing with some injuries, and Derrick Henry came in for him last week, had a really good week. If you had Derrick Henry stashed on your bench, this might be a good week to play him. Also, James White, for the running back for the New England Patriots, he could have a pretty big share of the offense this week. Rex Burkhead is out, and they're expecting Amendola back, but that team is so banged up, and James White is a piece that they know that they can move around, and he's a piece that works. So I'm expecting him to have a pretty good game. Now, in Cincinnati, they just fired their offensive coordinator. So I'm expecting some things to change. And one of those things that I think could happen is that Joe Mixon, the rookie running back, could come in and see more work. Now, Marvin Lewis, the coach there in Cincinnati, he does not like rookies, and he very much avoids playing rookies. Well, the Bengals are in a very good, in a very bad spot right now. And the Bengals are going to need to generate some offense. If Marvin Lewis is going to keep his job, he's probably going to have to start giving the rookies some chance to play. Also in Baltimore, Alex Collins is a guy that could see some playing time this week. Terrence West, their normal in between the tackles guy, hasn't been practicing this week. We'll see what he does on Friday. But Alex Collins could come in and play quite a bit against Jacksonville. So that's a couple guys. Also in Carolina, tight end Greg Olsen is out, and Devin Funchess is a big receiver that they have that could be the guy that starts working the middle of the field.
Who is that again? That didn't come through.
Devin Funchess.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, Devin Funchess. He played tight end, I believe, some in college, and he's a bigger guy. He can work the middle of the field where Greg Olsen would normally work. So that's another guy too that is really kind of New Orleans on Sunday. New Orleans defense is terrible. Me, you, and your kids could put up points against that defense. So that is definitely somebody. Also, as far as tight ends, I really like Jack Doyle this week. The Cleveland Browns have shown that they, much like last year, they cannot protect the middle of the field. And Jack Doyle has shown very good rapport with Jacoby Brissett, the new quarterback. That connection seems to be the only thing that's really working in Indianapolis. And they might actually have a shot to win this game. And I expect Jack Doyle to be a big part of their game plan on Sunday.
That's awesome advice indeed, and that's awesome information that's coming right at you from Tyler Baker from the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast. It is, again, available every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. That's when it drops, and you got to check it out if you've got Libsyn or if you've got Apple Podcasts or if you've got anything that can go ahead and get the iTunes or Apple Podcast app like Overcast.fm and Player.fm and whatnot. One last question before we head on out, and obviously the games are coming up indeed for this weekend, and there's some great matchups, but what do you see going forward as far as the quarterbacks, especially in Minnesota, where Sam Bradford is now really up in the air as far as his future because of his, injury prone and, a really faulty knee when it comes right down to it.
Well, I was fully expecting him to play last weekend, but it was genuinely a game time thing. They took him out, they tested the knee, they didn't like it. Now it's my understanding that the problem with the knee is not related to his ACL. Now he's torn his ACL twice, and they're saying that the problem is not related to the ACL. So that's good. So the same injury that he's had twice, this is not related to that. And now it's been my understanding, and of course, Friday's injury report will tell us a lot, but it's my understanding that he's practicing, that there's not the swelling that they were seeing last week, and it seems like he's a go. But again, we'll have to wait till Friday.
Okay, fair enough indeed. And they can always check out your Saturday podcast, which will give you all that information, correct?
Yes, that's right. I'll go over all of the injuries and, do the best we can. Some of them will be game time decisions. And I'll tell you in the podcast who is a game time decision. But sometimes some teams label guys as questionable that really aren't questionable. And sometimes teams kind of undersell injuries too. So you have to know that guys like John Fox, the coach for the Bears, he's not going to tell you anything. He will tell you as little as possible about injuries on players. So the Saturday podcast will answer a lot of those questions.
But also as well, keep up to date with the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast Facebook group site, because obviously any breaking news you'll be posting on there as well. That's some great information. Plus, he also, like I said, gives out advice for any team that you have. He looks at your roster. He looks at your teams. He looks at potential trades that are offered. Yes. I see it all week long. And I'll tell you what, he does a great job interacting with fantasy football owners out there. I just so appreciative you come on each and every week, and we'll, I guess, recap the Sunday obliteration of most of my team. Will probably fall under, and probably unfortunately by the first quarter fumble 2 or 3 times, and my quarterback Kirk Cousins will throw 3 interceptions. But you never know. You never know. I'm 2-0.
Kirk Cousins could have a really good game this week. Kirk Cousins could have a good game. I'm expecting him to. They host the
crossing my fingers
Raiders.
While on camera. I'm crossing my
fingers. Yeah, we'll see. Last week, Washington really wanted to run the ball, and they did a really good job of it. This week, I don't know if that's going to be the game plan. Again, I'm not in the planning room, so I don't exactly know, but I can tell you that Oakland is not going to let the foot off the gas. And I see that.
True.
Yeah, I think this game could be a little bit of a shootout, and that always bodes well for fantasy quarterbacks.
It does indeed. So I'm hoping for that as well. All right. Once again, it is Tyler Baker from the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast. Again, catch it today every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, but you can also catch it anytime on Apple Podcasts, Libsyn, Overcast.fm, and so many other podcasting channels. Tyler, as always, it's great to have you on the air, and we look forward to having you on the Monday show to give a recap of Week 3 in the NFL.
I'm super excited for it. I love being on your show. I love helping people get better at fantasy football, and thanks for having me on.
Thanks as always, and we appreciate you being part of the PCC multiverse.